What is the DataMade interview process like for you?
And so we've really tried to expand beyond into groups that we aren't already in, and that involves reaching out to different partner groups and getting ourselves known and our name recognized in different circles, and also just expanding the kinds of work we do. So the process is really we focus a lot on broadening that pool, and then quite a lot of time trying to figure out the right way to word a job posting, and I've read a ton of them, and they can be so intimidating. Oftentimes, job postings I've seen have information that they're asking for that is like completely irrelevant, but it's just quote like one of those things you put on your resume, like must have 5 years of this particular technology experience. And like we really honestly, if you look at our job postings, we actually, even though we're a Python shop, we don't require at least for our junior devs, to know Python. We don't require them to know it. We expect you to learn it while you're here and have some foundational understanding of computer science, but we are actually fine with you not knowing specific technologies. What we care about the most is that curiosity and desire to learn new technologies, because you're going to learn, like no matter what, no matter how qualified you're going to learn the way we do things, the kinds of ways we approach problems, and every project has new things to learn. And so when we pick the candidate that we want to pick, it's almost number one is their interest and capacity to learn new skills and their desire to want to learn new skills, because that's just the most critical skill that you need to have to do the kind of work we do.
What was the DataMade interview process like for you?
It was very casual. So initially you had to submit an email with the basic information, a CV, and a letter of interest. And then there was an interview. So DataMade accommodated me. I happened to be in Italy at the time. I was managing a small summer music festival. And I talked to Derek and one of the other developers for about an hour. It was very relaxed. So it was more, the interest was in finding an appropriate culture fit and not so much finding someone who had vast amounts of technical knowledge.
What was the DataMade interview process like for you?
The interview process was that they posted the job, and then I actually met up with Forrest ahead of time. But he set aside an hour and met with me, and we had coffee, and he answered. One thing he did answer that I thought was really remarkable was he was able to discuss with me kind of like the pay scale. So like for this set of skills, like here's what you could expect to be paid, and like for a more senior engineer, like here's kind of what they could expect to be paid. And I thought that was really nice because you don't always get that in interviews. And it wasn't even an interview, it was just an informational kind of thing. So the interview itself, I was really nervous because I didn't know what to expect. It was like the first tech interview, actually. But actually, it just turned out to be kind of talking about the job, more of a conversation than like the third degree or the Spanish Inquisition or whatever. There was no like right FizzBuzz questions, which is great because that can be such a waste of time. But it was really good, and it was pretty quick, and they kept the communication lines open. They actually said because it's Forrest and Derek are the owners, and they're both dudes, and they're like, if you want to talk to other people who aren't dudes or just other people who aren't us, and you're more than welcome to. So I really appreciated that they opened that up. And I actually did talk to Kathy, who was another engineer here before she left right before I started. But it was great that they made her available as well.
That's awesome. Okay. What was your interview process with DataMade like?
My interview process with DataMade was different from any of the other interviews that I was doing at the time. I had grown kind of accustomed to the style of interview that was very technical, where I was posed kind of toy problems and asked to talk through them or whiteboard through them, and then asked sort of superficially about my work history and my educational history. And then at DataMade, when I interviewed, I met Forrest and Derek at a coffee shop, and we talked for 45 minutes about just a huge number of things. We talked about my life and where I was from and where I grew up and what I thought about it. And for a big portion of the interview, we sat down with a web app that I was working on at the time. I was building a little web app that was tracking buses and trolleys in the city of Philadelphia. And we did what to me felt like the closest analog would be like an art critique, where we walked through the app in really fine detail, both like the interface and the code, and we talked about why I made the choices that I made. We talked about what they felt when they were using it, and then we talked about problems that I was having as I was building it. So one particular problem I was having was that the geographic data for the vehicles polled at a really low frequency, so it would only update every 4 or 5 minutes, and it was really hard to tell based on that data where any bus or trolley was at a given time. And so we spent 10 minutes talking about the different sorts of approaches you can take to that problem. Forrest and Derek pointed me to a working group of people at Shy Hack Night who had been thinking about transit path problems. Forrest gave me an academic paper about estimating transit paths based on low-frequency polling. And it just felt so much better than any of the other interviews that I had, because I felt like I was working through a problem that I had had time to consider, which was really important. I wasn't sort of just being tested on how quickly I could recognize toy problems. And I was also talking about something that I cared about and that I was really passionate about and wanted to do better on. And I felt really invested in the process, and I felt like kind of my work mattered and was respected in that moment. And that was most of the interview process, and it felt really good. And I left having overcome a huge stumbling block in a project that I cared about a lot. So I left not knowing whether I would get a job offer, but knowing that it had been a really valuable experience either way.